Today, you'll often hear Henry Knox's expedition described as the noble train, which conjures up images, maybe if not of a locomotive, then at least a long line of sleds, cannon, and draft animals moving across the New England landscape. But this is a little misleading. If we go back to the original phrasing that Henry Knox uses, we see that that is part of a larger sentence. In fact, it appears in a letter that Knox wrote to General Washington just about a month after he was dispatched from the American camp to go to Ticonderoga to collect artillery. In the letter, Knox describes to Washington how within a little over 2 weeks, he hopes to bring the general, quote, a noble train of artillery. Now, the operative phrase here is not a noble train, but rather train of artillery. This was a well-known phrase in the 18th century. The shortened form of noble train works a bit today because train did mean a procession in the 18th century, but train of artillery specifically appeared as a separate entry in 18th century dictionaries, including Samuel Johnson's famous dictionary, which was something that Knox actually carried in his bookstore prior to the Revolutionary War. Train of artillery is the language used to describe the collected ordnance of a field army. This phrase actually goes back centuries even before the end of the 18th century. So at least as early as the 16th century, before formal standing armies existed and before regular artillery services existed, when a king wanted to go into the field against his enemies, he would collect a train of artillery, a group of cannon that he could bring together, take into the field, that would then be dispersed at the end of that campaign. By the 18th century, the term train of artillery was still in use, specifically referring to the artillery of a field army, or even more generally, the artillery service. In fact, in 1775, when Massachusetts raised their regiment of artillery, it was officially called the Train of Artillery. And throughout the Revolutionary War, the entire artillery branch was often referred to simply as the train. Now, noble was an addition that Knox was making simply as an adjective, qualifying this as a magnificent, grand train of artillery that he was bringing to General Washington. And in fact, even the specific phrase, noble train of artillery, was not original to Henry Knox. It had appeared in print many times before. Knox himself may have read this in British author William Guthrie's account of a campaign by Archduke Albert against King Henry of France in the late 16th century, where he brought with him into the field a noble train of artillery, something that appeared in his Complete History of the World, another book that Henry Knox sold in his bookstore prior to the American Revolution. So rather than describing a noble train, the movement of the artillery to Boston, Knox was describing the noble train of artillery, the quality and value of the important prize that he was bringing from Ticonderoga all the way to General Washington in Boston.